what do I want? What are all the opportunities out there?
Sure.
But if I'm working on an existing product and I'm like working on a feature or a particular item, it's like, well, I really don't want to, like, I'm not going to take a screenshot and then slice and dice it and move stuff around. And that's probably not even be my deliverable. I'd rather just like deliver like whatever HTML or CSS because I'm working within it.
Yep.
So maybe that's it. Or do you feel like even if you're working on a feature that you're primarily working in Photoshop?
Yeah, I mean, at least it's just kind of the process that I'm currently in. Yeah, just like I was saying before, to kind of visually see where things are. I mean, I think it can be a little bit more abstract to think about things with the coding. I mean, after a while you kind of get familiar with that pattern. Am I the only one who's starting in Photoshop, or is everybody jumping into code?
So I'm a visual designer, so normally I'll do my designs in Photoshop and then hand them off to a front-end developer.
What are some of the hurdles that you're noticing or
Um,
pros to that approach?
So actually with mobile, I'm kind of just getting started on my first project. I'm kind of here just to learn and no hurdles yet.
We actually had a conversation. Cassie is our senior art director at Hoover's, and she's working on a mobile app now. And so one of the things that she's trying to tackle up front is PPI, right, and how to deal with DPI in your Photoshop file before you start doing high fidelity mockups, right? So you got a 640 or a 320 by 640 layout for an iPhone 4. You got a 320 or a 320 by longer something for an iPhone 5, layout. It's basically the same dimension, same PPI. PPI I think is a little higher actually, but it's basically just a longer, template. And then of course on Androids and stuff, you've got something that's even stranger. So you kind of have to plan for things to be a little fluid. If you're going to use something like Cordova or PhoneGap, if they're going to do a native app, it's more locked. But you still have to plan. Do they have a 3, a 3G, a 4, a 4S, a 5? And now it looks like they're coming out of, out of China with a 4.3-inch display for the new iPhone 5. So it's going to get bigger, and it's probably going to have a different resolution. So the question is, if you're going to do high-fidelity mock-ups, and if that is going to hold up the development process, right, then these kinds of things have to be known up front. How high of a resolution are you having to work with before you do this? And that will make a difference when you make decisions for marketing material like photography and imagery and things like that. But is that necessary to the experience of the application? Does that need to be decided up front, or could you just put a placeholder there and say, there's going to be a really cool image here of somebody holding a baby? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it totally depends on the type of project you're working on. I mean, majority of my career, I did work in Photoshop. Mm-hmm. Creating design layouts, but I worked for branding agencies and game development studios, so things were very visually rich, and I was much more concerned about, as much concerned about like what the banner or header imagery on the page is going to look like, as well as the layout and column width and all that kind of stuff. Now that I work for Indeed, it's a much more minimal, sort of simple design aesthetic, and I'm not going to spend all my time in Photoshop worrying about what a button or control looks like. Like this is not the type of thing we're really worried about. So it doesn't Photoshop is not efficient at all for doing that type of work. And I'm more, working on different states, different interactive states. And now we're getting into, responsive design and that kind of stuff. I don't use Photoshop at all. It's fireworks and sometimes a browser and just doing stuff in CSS. So I don't think you really talk about have this discussion without sort of needing to know the context of what kind of projects you're working on. Because you're not going to do, if you're working on a promotional set for a movie or a video game, that's night and day compared to working on a very sort of simple or utilitarian sort of mobile app. That's a business tool.
Like a software as a service
tool,
application.
or a service or application. It's night and day, right? So I think different tools for different projects. So I don't, I don't know. You can't really take Photoshop out of that completely. I think if you're coming from sort of an agency background or much more visual branding sort of background, you're going to keep using Photoshop, I think. I don't think you can get rid of it. You might be able to separate it in different parts of the project, right?
So I'm curious, for those of you working on mobile platforms, how do you do pixel perfect even mock-ups early for different resolutions for adaptive come up with one for a couple of common layouts, or?
Just make 120 or so different.
Just iPhone 3 and you're done.
Yeah, I mean, for the websites that I'm working on right now, I'm doing a smartphone, a tablet, and a desktop. And obviously, that's not going to cover all of them by any means.
What are you using for common red sites
Yeah, what size?
and mobile? Because
We're kind of basing it on like the audience, the Google Analytics.
so iPhone 4.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
so-
actually, for her sites, a lot of people are using like an older generation, like 3G and 3GS.
Huh.
So, I guess because it's an on-top world, I don't know.
And are they going to be native apps, or is it it's a web app?
It's a website, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we were looking at is the difference in how the browser treats the scaling, right, versus a native app, and how it treats the scaling. The browser is going to do its best to, for instance, have your font match what it was before at a full web view. A viewport, I think, settings and header information. But like native apps, for instance, it's just going to double up, well, quadruple, I guess, the size of your image if you're using a PNG, and then it gets pixelated. Like, it looks bad on a higher resolution device. And we can't really plan for that. There's too many permutations.
I mean, there's a lot of tools for doing responsive web design.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
We use Twitter Bootstrap a lot.
I don't think you have to plan. I think you have to stop planning for a bunch of different specific screen sizes, like entirely. Like you can't control the screen size anymore at all. You can't expect any of it. You can expect like ranges, but
Yeah.
What's your workflow then?
Where?
What's your work?
Well, for websites, for whatever profession you're in.
I'm an intern here on the UI team, but I started doing web design a long time ago for me. Like if it's a very text-based website, then I usually just jump straight into the code. And if it's like something very simple conceptually, like header bar, blah blah blah, blah paragraph text. I'm making an app with a friend, like a mode native game. So for that, we needed like a very high fidelity mockup to be able to say that we have the same vision, so that he's a developer, and I don't develop for Objective-C. And so we needed like high fidelity mockups to be able to say like we're thinking the same thing in our heads. So for that, I used a vector tool like to just mock it up. And for I guess mostly it's a mix for me. Like I like having mock-up tools that are visual because I think that way, and I can it's much faster for me to get like an app idea out in like a visual mock-up tool. But if you're not married to that, you just throw that away as soon as you need to. So I don't know, it's a mix.
It's kind of weird coming from a more Photoshop background. I like things to be pretty. So when I develop them and they're just like a outline, I don't feel like a sense of accomplishment, because it's not pretty, and that's expected, for it to have some kind of gloss to it, which is nice to use things like Twitter Bootstrap that already have some pretty, and we actually use flat strap now, so it's all flat design from Twitter Bootstrap. They took all the gradients out and everything else. It's all flat design, Metro, that kind of thing. But like you said, for a unified vision, that makes a lot of sense. Where we work, a lot of the high fidelity designs seem to be for the benefit of the product team, who then take those designs and hand it off to the marketing team, who then go and show those designs to some potential customers and say, look what we're going to give you in 6 months.
Stop it.
And yeah, we got to stop that, because promising something that doesn't exist, is bad, but it's also not agile. I mean, any of that could change. Any of the technical requirements could change. But it's definitely a good plan to show some version of high fidelity mockups to stakeholders higher up in the org at some point early on in the conceptual process. The question is, how do you do that without them thinking that's what I'm going to get, or how do you do that and still do agile? Obviously you need to have Photoshop designs, but I've worked for a number of web companies here in town, and even at our current company, we have like what, one UX, dedicated UX person?
Two now.
Okay, so we have two. But how many, but we have like what, 6, 7 Photoshop designers?
Yeah.
About, so
Probably somewhere in there.
that's even an outlier. Like most companies I talk to have like 8 Photoshop designers and no UX developers, right? Or they have, it's very, or Photoshop developers are doing UX, you know, but they haven't, the company hasn't given them the funding to go and, hey, go to this seminar, you know, do this thing, go through this process, learn the tools of the trade. So I guess that's not normal. Like you guys aren't doing that at Indeed, I guess.
What?
The part of the bulk of your team in the creative side being Photoshop bound, like creative, high fidelity creative versus UX, like mock-up and prototype, and then delivering high fidelity mock-ups before development even starts. So we don't, our development team doesn't even get a story until there's an image of a result for what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I guess it's a little different here, because again, sometimes it might be an image or like we'll mock something up. Again, if it's a new feature, it might just be take a screenshot of the existing page, like make some space, put it down, and then post it and be like, what about something like this? Or you just quickly like make a flow and be like, maybe it'll be something like this. Again, sometimes it's in code, like it's just easier to actually just write it, or it's kind of confusing, like I don't know how the interaction is what's important. I'm just saying like what's getting said or where we're going to say it. It's like, oh, when I push this button, this thing's going to show up. Is that going to feel weird? Do I get confused? So you actually just like mock it up. But like that's the point isn't to have the pixel perfect deliverable as much as you're just using it as a mechanism to communicate to product and to engineering. This is what I'm thinking. What are the issues with that? And like, are these the right words? Is this where we want to say this? Can we build this? You know, those type of things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think historically one of the issues with Hoovers has been that we've been so invested in what has been created, and then once the design doesn't work, maybe because of dynamic text or because of technical reasons or because of the space is not available or whatever, then it's been a real issue changing and being agile there, because everyone's like, no, that's
what you said.
That's what we're building. That's it. No, not that. I think, at least from our side, that's been historically an issue.
Yeah, and we're also sure not to handle, not how to use your English. We're also, I'm also sure not sure how to handle application, not only the user experience of where you present elements on the page, but the interactivity, the flow of it. So I'm working on a mobile app right now, and I was reading the guidelines for getting it approved from the iTunes store. And they're like, if you use web technology, like Cordova, it can't look like a website or act like a website. It has to move and transition and flow, and so I'm using a lot of CSS3, animates and transitions. And that's more and more that's part of the process. People expect that. They expect like dragging and this just kind of very fluidic interface. What part of the design process before you get to wireframes or after you get to wireframes or high fidelity, or where do you start thinking about that? And who comes up with it? Whose job is that? Like, is that the UX developer's job? Is that like somebody that's the interactive designer's job? Like, is that somebody that you hire that's all that they do is storyboard? Where does that part come from?
Doesn't it just come from the platform or whatever library you're going to use? It's just, it's like I'm gonna pick a tool. I'm gonna pull some JS library. I'm sorry.
But who specifies? Even if the platform supports it, like I can slide to the left, I can slide up or down or right. Like, where do the requirements come from for what is the interaction to dismiss this dialog? Like, what's the transition?
Ideally, again, if you're on iOS, I imagine somebody's done that before, and probably multiple people. So just look to the OS. Like, if things typically come in from the left and then you go back to the right, then you should just do it that way. Like, just again, unless you have a reason not to do that, right? Or if you're using a library and it's like, well, this is a library we can use. It's small enough, or it's fast enough, or engineering likes it enough, or whatever. Then just do whatever the library supports.
Well, with CSS3 transitions, you can do pretty much whatever you want. I can make it flip around like a cube. I can wrap it around a ball. I can, you know, you can pretty much do whatever you want with these transitions.
That's true, but I don't know. I guess that's the thing is like when you fake it, like there's all these like little edge cases of like, well, I'm scrolling and then I hit back and this transition is like, well, that's not really what CSS3 is really made for. Like it's great. It's great for basically like having a view and you can move that view or shrink it or whatever, but it doesn't affect the layout. So when you move stuff around, you're not affecting layout.
Yeah.
And again, with like different scroll positions and stuff, when you're going back and forth, like having that all get remembered, doesn't really support any of that.
Well, what you'll often see is, none of my friends that work in film, and so what you'll often see in storyboards is panning directions, chiaroscuro like layouts of like what's in light, what's in dark, so that the gaffers can start the lighting. You can set the track for the steady cam, you know, for the dolly, and you know where the shot's going to be. But we don't really do that in web design. There's a thing, and it's between here's a company like overview page, and then here's a sub page under the overview that only shows you like its competitors, right? Which maybe has bar graphs on it. How do I get from there to there? And flashing from there to there instantaneously is fine now, but in the next 5 years, that's not going to be fine anymore. They're going to expect some kind of thing. So is there a note card on a wall that goes in between there, or is there a... Because you could just say, yeah, I mean, the library dictates it, but yeah, like Cheng was saying, like, who picks? You know, who's making that call? And should it be discussed before it gets to implementation, or... I would think so.
When we were working on our game, like, we had all of these crazy ideas for, like, transitioning between things, and, like, when we finally decided, like, we couldn't build it until we had decided that, because it changes drastically the way that it was going to be built. Like, is it going to be the same view, or are we going to make another view and then transition into the view? Like, are we gonna... So, it's everybody's job, I think. I think it's everybody who has whoever has a product in their head, the people who are creating the product, it's all of those people's job, I think. Because you should all, like, if you're not all on the same page about how the product feels, then it's...
It's just communication for the requirements or the specification of what the product is. It's as much a part. I think, did anyone go to the IXDA talk, I think it was last month, about micro interactions?
Yeah.
Oh, I read the article, but can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I was there too. What?
Well, the example that he gave was just that he was sitting at some kind of classical music performance, and you know, obviously you're supposed to have all your phones off, but somebody's iPhone alarm went off and kind of made a lot of noise and was annoying. And he was just talking about how that ability to override, you know, the mute feature on your iPhone is great if you're like, it's 7 a.m., you know, and you want your alarm to go off. But in a specific situation like performance, that's very annoying. But I think the main idea was that micro interactions really make a great or crappy product. So.
Right, it's like something you should be elevated to first class, right up there with, you know, pixel perfect layout of the static content, if all the transitions are super important. And yeah, maybe you don't need a full-time person working on that next to a full-time person doing Photoshop, but it does need to be thought of, and they're really, really important, and they're overlooked right now.
I went to a seminar at Adaptive Path on the customer experience. It wasn't the journey, but how to wrap that customer experience in. The critical thing was is very much using an Agile process to uncover pain points and potential problems. So we played roles. We had a product manager, we had designers, we had developers, and we had customers, and we interviewed each other, and we used the same process with the Post-it notes and created, you know, wrote scenarios out. Well, what if this happens? What if I did that? Well, what if I want this? And over a period of time, we came up with, you know, the problem is that we may think it's a good idea, but then we go talk to our customer, and they're upset because it's not big, the logo's not big enough, or whatever the argument is. Well, through that process, and it's kind of a process, so it's a little hard to explain. It's a lot like any coming up with any Agile process where you estimate. We were able to identify different people's pain points, and then to have some respect for them going, no, I can't really do what I want to do here because marketing needs this to do this. And it was something that they spent a lot of time teaching on, and it's definitely something it'll take a lot of practice to get good at. But that's the same thing, is without the entire group in the room having a representative, it's really, really difficult to identify those things before one person thinks, I've got the idea, I'm going to run with it, and then they're basically dictating to another person in this group how they have to interact with that thing, and it causes a lot of friction, a lot of pain. So I mean, it's going to be a while before I can do it, but you know, it's hard. You can't have a group that's a part of the process not represented at the table to have a chance to throw in their 2 cents when it's still on a post-it. You know, when it's still on a post-it, and sometimes it's amazing how upsetting it is for people. But when it's a post-it, it's just a momentary upset. Then, even 6 months down the pipe, having the thing not work the way it was expected to work, and also that whole idea of what's the minimal deliverable? What can we deliver in this chunk of time that has value? And if only a certain group, say designers and developers, get to have a say on that, maybe product manager, then at the end it may or may not be what they really wanted to deliver. I know that sounds very vague, but it's very hard for all of us because it seems like in this world we are all polarized to what our personalities do best. If you're a designer, you design. If you're a coder, you technically consider the mathematical consequences of every decision. And it's finding these different minds that can kind of build the bridges. This type of interaction where, like a scrum master, you become a servant leader, go, well, what do you think about that, Susan? She's in marketing, she has feelings about that. Well, I need to make these numbers. Well, what could we do to kind of, not drive dead to the point of distraction by making multiple changes after the scope has been determined and still deliver that for you? And then, it's hard. It's just a different way of thinking. Marketers think in these big terms, and the developers think in specifics, and designers think of how much fun it would be if. And that is just something that, as we develop an understanding and compassion for each other, if you're analytical and understand the emotional person, respecting the analytical need to have things in a specific way, I think it's going to help all of our teams a lot more. But it's definitely a challenge because it flies in the face of what each individual feels most comfortable with. And getting uncomfortable is not very fun on a daily basis, but it just doesn't seem any way around it.
Ellie has been teaching me a new strategy lately. She's been doing a lot of blogging on UX, so I wanted to get her to pipe in. We read 2 interesting articles about a month ago. One was on Google's strategy for how they come up with a product strategy for all the startups that they fund. There's like 140 different startups. So they have this 5-day process of how you do these pitch ideas, where you split out, how you do the planning, and then how you all come together with a cohesive vision. And I'll send that article out to the UX SIG email list because it was fantastic. And then there was this other article on doing it in one day, like an internal process. And one of the parts of the process was this part called Crazy Eights, which is like a rapid design process of how to come up with some of these different visions for how to do the product. But I think she could probably explain it better for like how that works.
The Crazy Eight.
Yeah.
You just take a piece of paper and you fold it once and then again and unfold it. You have like 8 little squares, and then you only get 40 seconds per square to like lay out the whole app. And you do it several times, and then over the process you figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then you can kind of pull from each person's 8, which one works the best, and then they from there make storyboards. Like then you just take one post-it and draw this one of your 8 on there, and then everybody can write, I like this, I don't like this, let's move that over here. With like little stickers. It's very interactive for everybody.
So basically, you get like a lot of brainstorming in a limited amount of time, and then you get up and you present your argument for why you think your app, has some good promise, and then everybody has a limited number of seconds and time to come around and give limited feedback about each one of those, and then you build out of those a cohesive kind of vision for what you want. One of the things we're talking about doing internally at Hoover's is actually, instead of, and then I want to ask this question about enterprise level products, because you were talking about creating the minimum size product possible. Dun & Bradstreet won't do that. They won't make a small product, which drives me crazy. So we have these year-long product things. But one of the things that we're talking about doing is say your project's going to cost $1 million, right, to build over X amount of time. Is it a better investment to spend X million dollars on a 16-person, 20-person team that's all supposedly agile, scrumming this process along, or is it better to take $200,000 and fund 5 teams and have them come up with different solutions and at different parts of the process come back and make pitches to product ownership and say, look at what we built, who wants to do it, and split up the money and split up the initiative?
Come to the next Agile Austin U. We put on a school for 10 weeks, and there were 40 of us, and it was free, with free dinner, and it very much competed with something you could pay a lot of money for. So we were able to do a lot of the exercises, a lot of different games, and you know, it's hard, it reveals a lot of your own issues, and that would be a really cool place, and I know we're going to do it again. I got stuck doing all the food, so next time I'm not doing the food by myself. But I learned so much about collaboration, about this whole personality thing I'm talking about. You know, and there's a lot of really good books, and I'm sure Todd knows a lot of them when they talk about, you know, but again, it's so much easier on a Post-it. It's so much easier on a Post-it, and we put together these very complex, huge projects, basically, well, if we can get this much done, then we have, and a deliverable doesn't necessarily mean something that the customer can use, but it's like we have accomplished this. I mean, I understand a little bit about Hoovers, and I remember getting down to the end of projects and something that should have been fixed here, like search, didn't get fixed, so then it didn't act like the customer wanted it to act. But that doesn't mean that you're delivering this big behemoth, but you might be delivering an accurate search module, and then you might be delivering, you know, this thing, and that's what the Agile U helped a lot of us. Like I thought I knew a little about Agile, but it's really Agile fall. It's really waterfall with like an Agile veneer, and but through that class I learned a lot more, and it certainly was affordable. It was free.
I wonder how much of the issues though are cultural or procedural, and not really it's like tools. Like it just seems like all this stuff that's like been coming up is like, well, the company will not do a minimum viable product. Like it has nothing to do with Photoshop. Like,
No.
Who cares about Photoshop? I mean,
No.
it's just like this is the culture, this is the process, and these processes are not changeable.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what the tools are or whatever, because.
Well, I think with Photoshop it does make a difference, because if you're doing high fidelity mock-ups of an application that has 3 views, then it's possible to iterate those quickly at the beginning to come to a cohesive vision and to do it. But when you have a massive, monstrous product, you can't do like a pixel perfect, or it takes a very long time to waterfall all those designs over a period of time. And so I think, you know, the Photoshop work is critical to give any product a sense of identity and brand and feel and like its own sense of self. And I just wonder if, like, you know, maybe you give a couple of those ideas up front to give a general idea, you know, of whatever, and then let designers go off into crazy design land, which is, you know, where I love to live sometimes, and then come back at the end of the process and compete over skins, like, or how they want to, you know, how they want it to work.
I think that something maybe that's missing is that in the past, when websites were less interactive, most of it was the appearance, the static appearance of it. And so a picture of something was the best tool for communicating a static appearance. Now it's a lot more about functionality and interaction, and those things aren't captured. There is still a thing to look at, but that doesn't tell the whole story. And so maybe what's missing is that part of the requirements or specification of the product needs to be what it looks like, and also spelled out in words the rationale for why does it look this way, or what is important about the way this looks that the designer is interested in, what is important about the way this interacts that the interaction designer is interested in, what is important about the flow that the user experience person is interested in, what is important about the functioning that the product manager is interested in, or what are some limitations that the developer knows about this platform, can't do this, or will need to support some kind of other interaction. So maybe when we're looking at these as requirement documents, there need to be more dimensions to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it that way at NI. They have a really good design pattern library with all of the code in it, with all of the uses in it. And they haven't gotten to the point where we don't have to do pixel perfect mock-ups. We have a very, very strict art director, and he can see one pixel, and that helps him with consistency in his mind. But when he takes that and he instructs the coder to make a beautiful pattern, he can just refer, go to Phoenix, that is an established pattern. So we're starting to talk about, would it be nice to be able to put a gray box there saying pattern blah blah blah, where because but it's still that psychological jump between seeing something beautiful, and as a designer, being that's my job to implement his patterns, I like looking at it too. But, and if I have the time, but there are times when there really isn't time. And, I mean, I just went to something and I talked to the guys at PayPal, and it takes them 8 months to get a new pattern free. Mm. They put it on a special website, everyone looks at it, chimes in, puts in their 2 cents, they talk about it, how can we make it work better. I'm in marketing and I really need some more call to action boxes. And that's what they do. And I know that at NI they have the one art director, he works with the creative director, he decides everything. He goes to they're doing this thing called rapid adoption, where they're pushing these patterns through. And it's really funny if you try to do something that breaks rapid adoption. Oh no, rapid adoption, you can't do that. So they have at least established some respectful power. So people have some power to say, hey, I'm the head of the UI, the UX, and that isn't going to fly. And what they're trying to do is they have 1 million unique pages, not 1 million records, 1 million unique pages that are not. I mean, it's literally the only site that's probably bigger than Dun & Bradstreet as far as the depth of what they have to do. And so a lot of times marketing people complain, but it's like, nope, that's the video pattern. And I'm, in these meetings, and it's really neat because they can ask for all they want, but they have authority, and that's the issue, is giving the people that you trust, like your art director or whomever, the authority to make the final decision. And it's just really interesting to watch that happen. I know that once they get the whole site's not even under the new redesign, and we still have all these old legacy pages, and I got to work on a lot of that stuff. And I know once they get it established, then they'll be able to expand those patterns as some more attractive things. But for right now, they're just trying to get it to be when the user gets to a page, if they see something, they expect it to work a certain way, and it does work that way. Anyhow, that's what they're doing there.
For those people that feel like they have a pretty good process, like here at Indeed, it feels like you have a pretty good process, and it seems like at NI there's a pretty established process. Does that cultural process come from the bottom up, or does it come from the top down? And is there an argument to be made or evidence to show that, especially because a lot of us work under tight timelines, we need this product by October or whatever. And so like a lot of this upfront work, the UX work, the high fidelity designs, they take time, but they create better product when you have more interactivity on the UX planning and things like that. But is there evidence that you've seen that shows this will save you money in this way at the end of the product, or it will make the product this much more successful, or how does that adoption take place, and how do you guys continue to try to refine that to change it?
I don't know if it comes from any particular direction. We're kind of very horizontal,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of, I guess everybody's just kind of on the same page. Nobody's really dictating the process, and nobody's really fighting to change it as much as, I guess kind of the weird thing is there's no really formal process, like this is the thing that we do. It's just like you do the thing that gets done, and if that's communicating via wireframes works, great. If you need to do a PSD, great. If you want to hack it up, go ahead. It's just communicating however it's best to communicate, and however it's fastest, then you just go ahead and do that, and as long as things are communicated. I actually thought it was interesting though, because you're saying well, I'm working on really tight deadlines, but then it's like, well, but those deadlines are several months out, or we don't do a minimal viable product, we're going end to end, this is going to be, so that doesn't seem like tight deadlines. That seems like really big. Like for me, tight deadline is like, I need to get it in. Like we talked about it this morning, and I'm going to try to get it in before the deploy right now.
Right.
You know, and I haven't eaten lunch. So like, I
Right.
need to, you know, so that's like tight deadline to me. But again, it's because it's cultural, and it's like, culturally we're okay with things going out, and maybe they're not perfect, but it's a learning opportunity. We're going to measure it. We're going to test it. We're going to get better. We know that just because it goes out, that doesn't mean like we're done. That's like we're building on it, and if it's important, then we will build on it. And if it's not important and we put it out, then you stop building on it because you're working on the important thing, right? So it's like, it's okay for me to fail. It's like, that thing sucked. And it's like, well, yeah, but nobody cares. Nobody uses it.
Yeah, nobody uses it
Nobody's
anyway.
happening it, and it's like, well, it's a sucky thing, but that's okay. Like, there was really no point in me spending, you know, 6 months making that sucky thing great because it's still going to suck. Like, the reason why it sucks wasn't, there was probably no amount of effort, or it wasn't the Photoshop, or, like, that wasn't the thing that was going to make it work, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's just like culturally being okay with moving quick and having things suck and maybe having things not be perfect, but knowing that you're going to refine them over time. And I guess everybody working here is kind of comfortable with that. It's like, you know, best effort. Let's just put it out there. Let's measure and let's get better.
Fail fast, fail often.
Yeah, it's a lot of failing fast and failing often.
And, yeah, I guess people are more forgiving of brands now. You know. I mean, they used to not be. You get something wrong once, and they'd be like, "Fuck you! I'm not buying another Volkswagen." Or
and then there's definitely
the Fieros explode.
Well, and it definitely depends on what kind of like industry you're in, right? Like you can't do that. Like if you're having this really personal relationship, like I'm trying to buy a car, I'm trying to, like, you really only do have that one shot, and it is really important to get that right. And so it makes sense to take a lot of time. Again, having these really refined experiences makes a lot of sense because that experience is what's going to sell it. But then you're working on a consumer internet product that has millions and millions and millions of people just hitting it all the time from everywhere. It's like, well, we've got lots of people coming. It's okay if we miss every once in a while, whereas if you miss selling a car, that's thousands and thousands of dollars that you just missed out on. So, you know, I guess it's about like how valuable it is to succeed too.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems that I ever had with D&B was their slow moving. They release a product, I mean, what, every couple of months, and that's a fast release cycle.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times you're talking 3 or 4 months, which is millions of dollars of work going out before they learn that it sucked.
Major products are 8 to 12 months.
Yeah, and there'll be, you know, just hundreds of features that are going out before a change, not one feature, one release.
So that's a cultural problem.
Yeah, and so we tried to get the release cycle down to daily, or, you know, that was my goal, because I come from a background of, you know, releasing fast. I like to fail fast and often, and if it sucked, you change it. You got, you know, change it in the morning. Who cares?
Yeah.
As long as I didn't break the build, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Just check it in and let it roll. You know, see what happens.
Yeah.
So, what other issues are people, you know, finding in their UX roles around town? Sorry.
Question. That kind of backtracking to what you were talking about, how you can't capture the way a website or an app is in like a mock-up. You can't capture that in like images anymore. You have to. You were talking specifically about writing, and I was wondering, does any, like, I know that whenever I am working on like a feature or a product or anything in my head, I write it out in detail. And I was wondering if anybody else uses like narrative as a sort of mock-up tool.
I think we should.
You guys do that?
I don't.
I personally do on my side projects, yeah.
Wouldn't that be like a user story almost?
User stories are usually not the ones that we typically experience in Scrum. I mean, user stories are typically user clicks this happens, this is available.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
So user story. No,
That's what my last
user-
girlfriend said too, so it's okay.
She's probably right.
Yeah. You're both right.
I think the user experience is not I want to click buttons. The user experience is I want something accomplished.
Yes.
In this way.
Not even in this way. Sometimes it's in this way. Sometimes it's in this way, and maybe the company has an interest in them doing it that way, or they can only support one way. But you know, if I can just pay my bills or get them paid,
Mhm.
I don't care if it's on my phone or if someone calls me up and says, would you like to pay today?
Mhm.
Okay, yes. Or if it just happens automatically, whatever the mechanism is, I just need that bill paid.
Yeah.
And that's the important outcome. I think you've lost sight. If you go down to the level of clicks here and scrolls down on the scroll bar on the right, you specify all the wrong
That's
things.
documentation.
Yeah, that's
Right.
implementation.
Right.
Like the user doesn't want that. They want their bill paid.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
They want a phone that makes phone calls. They don't
Yeah.
care.
I mean, yeah, they don't care.
They don't.
That's the product manager's job to come up with what is the feature, and the user experience person, or whoever's in charge of user experience, to how do we accomplish that? What mechanisms, what are the interactions, like what is the signal that I've completed this call? How do I indicate who I want to call to? How do I indicate that the other person is ready to talk? How do I hang up?
Okay.
And that's part of what that customer experience mapping is. You get there, and then each person is able to add, well, what could go wrong, or what would I hate if it did this, and wow, wouldn't it be? And then it's just this interesting things start to happen between these disparate personalities because they bring their perspective. Well, I really like them to be able to do this, but what do they want to do? You know, and it just the dialogue that comes out of it. It's like a chemical reaction. And then the thing that's cool is everybody gets smarter than they are. You know, a group of people is so much smarter than one person. One person might be really good at some things, but we don't hear each other and we can't get smarter.
And going back to the narrative thing, like there's tools that will help you like mock up the transitions or interactions between screens. And again, maybe that's hard to pitch to product if they have a certain expectation on this needs to be final design. But again, most of the time it's trying to figure out like, are we doing the right thing? Like, I'm going to click here and click here and click here, and then like I'm confused. I don't know where I am anymore.
Yeah.
What do we say? It's usually those things. It's not the visual design of the site. It makes me so confused. I don't understand like how to use it. I got to this page and this form is like 40 pages long. I'm not going to fill this out on my phone. And discovering that early rather than concentrating on the pixel perfect Photoshop mocks of the thing, like usually it seems to be more helpful.
More important.
But again, there's like mock-up tools that will let you just there's like briefs and I forgot what else. There's lots of them that you could just basically put all the content and put all the screens up, and then you can kind of go through the flow and say like, oh, this is the product. Like that's the thing that you should start polishing, right?
Yeah.
Like polish that experience.
I love these meetings. Thanks for coming and sharing your experience. For next month's meeting, we typically do it around the 20th, so we'll have another one. Send some ideas. Does anybody have any good questions that they want to ask about, about dealing with UX, the evolution of UX, about UX careers and what's available, whatever a good topic is for next month. And secondly, we can have them wherever we want. Indeed has been amazingly gracious to have to host us here and to provide me with free caffeine. There are other options at other offices, but another option is to do happy hours at Mr. Tramp's, where they have AirPlay. So if we have like UX examples, you can just pull it up on your phone and it comes up on all the screens, and we can collaboratively share and just have a discussion after work, which also might be good. They have that back room that we can reserve. And if we do that, Mr. Tramp's, the guy that owns that place is a really nice guy. And the more people that come and order drinks or whatever, he gives us 50% of the revenue from the bar. So we can use that to do what we want to do, like have events or paid events for the UX group or whatever we want to do. So just think about it. Everybody join the Agile Austin UX SIG Google group if you're not already on it. And so let's just try to keep the conversation going and figure out what we want to talk about and where we want to meet next time. But I love coming to these things, so thank you.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to, but I can mysteriously put that